quickly recap what we're up to so far to make sure we help up. The Mishnah told us here that Chavav that if you sprinkled the blood on the mizbeach on the wrong section of the mizbeach, it should have been below the line, the red line. You made it above the red line. You did it in the wrong place. So the Mishnah says it is puzzle. It is puzzle. Then it says you don't get chorus. So what exactly does puzzle mean? So Shmuel came along and said puzzle means that you cannot eat from that carbon, but the person, the owner of the carbon, did receive their kapara. And he learns it from a pasuk that it says that I put it on the mizbeach lechaper. Whatever touches the mizbeach, any section of the mizbeach is a kapara. And puzzle only means that the carbon is disqualified. So then we had a problem from another place where it says that if in this particular case you did above the line, below the line, and all that, if there's more blood, you can take the more blood and try again and do it a second time. Now, and because Shmuel's, now the question is, why would you need to do it a second time? If Shmuel's of the opinion that it was effective, no, it was it was effective. So if it was effective, why bother doing it a second time? So Shmuel, in order to reconcile that with our Mishnah here, he says that's talking about a kohen pasul did it, not in our Mishnah talking about a kohen kosher did it. So even though you did it in the wrong place, loy b'mekayme is kimekayme. It's still good enough for the kapara, but not as far as the animal is concerned. The animal is pasul, and that over there talking about a kohen pasul did it. A kohen pasul did it, then like as if nothing happened, and therefore you can always fix it up. You can always fix it up. And then we brought, I'm just giving you a little review so that when we go further in the you'll follow what's going on. So then we brought a brisa where it says that, bottom line is, we basically said is that it says elsewhere that if you went ahead and you did it in the wrong place and you had a thought of pigul, it is it's pigul and it's possible. Now the question is, it says over here that it's possible, but there's no curse. The question is, if you sprinkle, it says over here that if you sprinkle blood in the wrong place and you had in mind the wrong time, it is pigul, but you don't get curse. Now the question is, if you're going to tell me that loy b'mekayme kimekayme, I don't care when the berach lands, it's as if it landed in the right place. So l'chayda, if I had in mind, he said that this will be eaten at the wrong time period, it should be real pigul. You should get curse as well. So the Gemara says no, that far we won't go because it says that since the zrika, when do we say that it's pigul, that with what you're doing with this matter, I mean, this sprinkling of the blood will enable you to eat the meat. But because we said before that this blood, sprinkling the blood, will not enable you to eat the meat because you're spraying the wrong part of the berach, so then that zrika doesn't make a pigul. So then you want to ask, if that doesn't make a pigul at all, then why is the animal disqualified? So we said we follow the view of Rabbi Yehuda that says that if you had in mind not to sprinkle it in the wrong time, but you had in mind, for example, to leave it and leave it another day, the blood, before you do anything with it, just to leave it there, it's also possible. It's not, so you don't get curse, but it's possible. So that's the view of Shmuel. So the bottom line of Shmuel is that loy kimekayme is kimekayme, and he reconciles that our Mishnah, the animal is possible to your kapara, and the place where it says that you can resprinkle the blood is talking about where kohen pasul did it. So we're up to here, up to Reish Lakish, about 10 lines at the top of the page. That was Shmuel's view. Now we're going to have Reish Lakish's view. We're going to have Rabbi Yehuda's view on how to deal with this mission. So we're up to 10, 12 lines at the top of the page. Reish Lakish Amar. Reish Lakish says, La'olam pasul mamish. Where I disagree with Shmuel is in Pshat and Mishnah. I agree with him with everything he says in Halacha. That shloi b'mekayme is kimekayme. If you sprinkle it in the wrong place, as if you sprinkle in the right place, as far as kapara is concerned, the animal is possible. But I disagree with you, Pshat, in this Mishnah. The Pshat in this Mishnah here is, because he uses the word pasul, it means that that there was no kapara here either. The Shlakish Amar la'olam pasul mamish. Take it literally. That not only the animal is that you cannot eat, but there is no kapara, and you have to do it again. But in principle, I agree with Shmuel that if you did it in the wrong place, loy mekayme is kimekayme dami. So leveloi kasha. So how are we going to deal? Because normally, if it only the carbon will be pasul, the Mishnah would have spelled it out. The carbon is pasul. And now that it says just pasul, the way the wording is, it means that it's pasul completely. That Bailim were not the schap and nothing happened. And no boss. And he says here, what about the kasha on the what about the pasuk? The pasuk clearly says that if you put it on the mizbech anywhere, it's a kapara. What do you tell me? Pshat Mishnah is no kapara. She said, "Like kasha." I'll tell you how pshat Mishnah is. Totally different pshat. If you just sprinkled on the wall and mizbech the wrong part, I agree with Shmuel. It's a kapara. You can't eat the animal, but it's a kapara. But you know what our Mishnah is talking about over here? Kan shenasan ba'amira, that you sprinkle the blood on the wrong part, and you had in mind the wrong time. So because you had in mind the wrong time, you said the wrong time, and therefore you get it's possible. It is possible because it was a zrika. It's possible, but there's no chorus involved. And why doesn't it get a chorus as well? If you had a mind, if you tell me it's a valid zrika, as far as kapara is concerned, and you had in mind that you're going to eat it the wrong time, why isn't it a full-blown pickle? Is, as we said before, that only sprinkling that enables you to eat the animal as well. If it's a full matir, then we say it's a full pickle. But over here, because it's not a full matir, because you cannot eat an animal, it's not a proper pickle. So why is it pickle at all? It's pickle because we said before, this follows view Rabbi Yehuda, that if you just had in mind even not sprinkling, just to leave the blood for another day, and just hinuach, another for the wrong time, is already usher as well. Says the Gemara, conscious mirror. Tanan, so that's we learned in a Mishnah. Chishav litin es anitin lamata lamaila. We learned that what happens if you had in mind that which should have been sprayed on the bottom below the red line, you did it above, right? And the maila, that which should be sprayed above, karmachatas, for example, you did it lamata. Ad midi the have machshavas hinuach. So what the Gemara is saying here is every single question that we had before on Shmuel, we repeat the same questions here. The Gemara just alludes to them. Tonight we started going through all the same questions, and the Gemara quickly says, and we'll give the same answers. And the last question was, if it's not really pigul because it's not a real matter, because you can't eat the animals, so why should it be us at all? And we answer because midid the habi machshavas hinuach. It's no different than the machshav of just leaving the blood there for another time. That you're going to leave the blood till tomorrow, which passes the animal according to Rabbi Yehuda, which we'll learn later on. Okay, so basically the Shlakish agrees in halacha that Shmuel, but he argues Pshat Mishnah. He says Pshat Mishnah is talking about that not only you sprayed the blood in the wrong place, but at the time you also had a mind to eat it the wrong times. Comes along Rabbi Yechon and says, you both agree to that Eina Mekayma Kim Mekayma. I disagree with you. I hold that if you did it in the wrong place, nothing happened. The balbos is not nischaper, nothing happened. Rabbi Yechon Idi v'idi shenasa b'shtika. That both everything is talking about. That you did it, nothing to do with people. You just did it in the wrong place, and that's it. And it's as if you didn't spray. So therefore, that other play Mishnah that says that you should go ahead and if you have leftover blood, spray it again. That's right. So how come our Mishnah doesn't say that as well? If you hold that if you spray the label of Kaim and nothing happened, so why can't our Mishnah say and take more blood and spray it again? You know why? Because Hadikadam Nefesh, that other Mishnah talking about there was spare blood left, and Hadilekadam Nefesh, there was no spare blood left. That's why our Mishnah doesn't mention it. Says the Gemara, okay, so that's Rabbi Yechon's view. See, he holds that if you spray in the wrong place, nothing happened, and therefore you could always remedy it by if there's still some blood dama nefesh spurting out, use that. So Gemara said, let's understand the last three words of our Mishnah is he did in the wrong place. Okay, it says it's possible, and then it adds there's no chorus. Now we're going to have to try to understand why does the Mishnah have to tell you there's no chorus? As if to say you would have thought there is chorus, but I'm telling you there isn't. So let's work our way through the three ways of learning Pshat in the Mishnah. Tanan, it says possibly in chorus. It's possible there's no chorus. Now, according to the Shlakish, it's very obvious what the Mishnah is saying. Because according to the Shlakish, it's talking about you spraying in the wrong place, but you had in mind the wrong time. So you would have thought, well, since it is partially a valid spraying because it's a kapara, and you had in mind the wrong time, that's pigul, maybe you should get chorus. So I'm telling you there's no chorus here because since it's not a real matzah, you cannot eat the meat, there's no chorus. So I understand according to the Shlakish why it said that. That's why it said there's no chorus. Ella, we're in Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, about 10 lines from the bottom of the page. So we're trying to explain the Mishnah over here Why our Mishnah says if you sprayed in the wrong place, above the line or below the line, do we consider it a valid spraying at all? The Mishnah says it's possible, but according to Shmuel and the Shlokish, the owner still had a kapara. According to Rabbi Yechanan, there's no kapara at all. So, says the Gemara. Please mute yourself, Paul. Hainu Tani, it says possible. The aim of karas. And the Mishnah concludes, you should know that the carbon is possible, there's no karas. According to Shlokish, it makes sense because it's talking about you spraying in the wrong place, but which is a partial valid spraying, and you had in mind the wrong time. You would have thought you'll get it's real pigul, you get karas, sometimes it isn't. Elo Rabbi Yechanan, according to Rabbi Yechanan, my aim by karas. According to Rabbi Yechanan, he's saying the spraying is not valid. Well, if the spraying is not valid, who cares what you had in mind? Nothing happened. So why does the Mishnah have to tell you there's no karas? Says the Gemara, you're right, kasha. It's a problem. It's a problem. What about a Shmuel? Okay, let's leave Rabbi Yechon alone. What about Shmuel? My aim by karas. What do you mean by Shmuel when we say that Shmuel says there's no karas? Shmuel said that the pshat in our Mishnah is that it's a valid spraying only as far as the person's kapara, but not as far as the animal. You're not allowed to eat the animal. And that other Mishnah that says that if you have leftover blood, use that. That's talking about a kohen. Puzzle did it. But in our Mishnah, there's no point in doing it again because it was a kapara. So why do you have to tell us no karas? So Shmuel will say the Mishnah is adding a new halacha. This last 3 words, I'll agree with Reish Lakish, is referring to a case of pigul as follows. If you gave it, if you added, a machshava that, you're going to, what do you call it, do in the wrong time, possible aim by karas. You should know there's no karas because since the spraying is not going to be, no, like Reish Lakish, but I hold it's only limited to the last 3 words. It's not the entire Mishnah, just the last 3 words. Now, the one question of Rabbi Yechanan is, even though we discredited Rabbi Yechanan, we still continue going. He said, according to Rabbi Yechanan, I have a question. If you're telling me that the spraying was not really spraying, right? We learned before that if the blood falls directly from the animal to the floor, the blood cannot be used again. You have to dispose of it. But if the blood fell into a pot, into a vessel, and then from the vessel it fell into the floor, you can just gather it together. So you're telling me that when you sprayed it on the mizbeach, it was not valid because you hit the wrong place. So it's no different than landing on the floor. So why can't you just collect the blood and use it again? Why do we say puzzle is finished, you can't do anything with it? Why not reuse the blood? Says the Gemara, according to Rabbi Yechanan, if you tell me what, it's not like you did anything, but let it be no different than if it fell down on the floor, and the din is v'yasfenu. You can collect the blood and use it again. So why can't you do the same thing here again? Says the Gemara, Savala, he holds Kimanda Amal Lo Yasfenu. There's actually an argument. If it lands on the mizbech, even if you tell me it was not a valid zrika, if it lands on after it was in the vessel and it fell on the floor, you can collect the blood. But what if it lands in the mizbech, even though it was the wrong region and nothing happened? There's a machlekes if the mizbech did some modicum of effectiveness here, that at least you cannot reuse this blood, and that's the machlekes. Rabbi Yechon holds that this Mishnah says you cannot reuse the blood. What's the story? Everyone agrees. Everyone agrees that if you place the blood that should have been placed above, and you did the right thing, you placed it above. Or the mata, blood that should be placed on the bottom, and you did it correctly. But you did something else. You put it on the right part of the mizbeach, but you did something wrong. For example, you used your left hand when you're supposed to use, let's say, your right hand. So then, lo yasfenu, you cannot use the blood again because it landed on the mizbeach in the right region. So once it's used on the mizbeach, you cannot reuse it. Lo nech, you know what the argument is? You put it on the wrong region of the mizbeach. Or the matter is it's supposed to go on the top, and about on top. Rabbi Yasi says, Lo yasfenu. Even though I would say that it's useless, but the fact that it landed on Mizbech, you can no longer use it again, you cannot collect it. And Rav Shimon says, Yasfenu. Rav Shimon says you can gather it. Now everyone agrees that it's useless, because if they're arguing about whether it's useful and you don't need another kapara, then why argue about whether you could reuse the blood? Have a stronger argument. Do you need another kapara or not? The fact that we don't argue that, we're only arguing you can reuse the blood, means everyone agrees there's no kapara for the Bible. Can you reuse the blood? And Rav Shimon says yes, you can. Rabbi says you can't. And now Mishnah follows Rabbi Yossi. Well, Mishnah is saying you can remember this. Now Mishnah follows Rabbi Yossi says you cannot gather it. So Rechav Zayin Lebei is the very top of the page. But Rav Chizda, Amar Avimai, Rav Chizda says in the name of Avimai that this Rabbi Yossi, Rav Shimon, I think they're arguing something else. How come everyone agrees, Benitnan Lamata, everyone agrees that if something belongs, I'll take it a bit further, he says. Something that should have been sprinkled below. Shenitnan Lamaila, you put it above, Shaloi Yasfena. Everyone agrees that you cannot gather it. And v'choshken, surely benitnin lemaila, something that belongs on top. That generally, he says that surely if blood that belongs on top, and you by mistake spray it at the bottom, surely the mizbeach is effective. You know why? Because eventually it gets to the bottom, because the blood on top will run down the wall and it'll hit the bottom. So eventually it'll hit the right spot. So surely everyone agrees that the mizbeach was effective, that you cannot reuse the blood. You know what the machlekes is? You have two mizbeachs. You have the mizbeach on the outside, mizbeach on the inside. You put it on the mizbeach on the outside. It belonged in the inner mizbeach, and you put it on the mizbeach. So you got it totally in the wrong mizbeach. What happens then? Do we say the blood cannot be reused because the fact is it landed on a mizbeach, or do we say you could reuse the blood because it's a different mizbeach altogether, and therefore you got it all wrong? We're on Chav Zayin or Beis. We're just finishing this little part here, about 6 lines at the top of the page. The chut shenit lefnim. Rabbi Yossi says yes, fine, you can reuse the blood. The Shirah says you cannot reuse the blood. So we're talking about a case over here is we had a machlekes if you sprayed the blood on the mizbeach on the wrong region of the mizbeach, top instead of the bottom instead of the top, whether the owner had any kapara here or not. Shmuel Shloki said they did. Rabbi Yechon says they didn't, and then each one explained the Mishnah accordingly. And according to Shmuel, the Mishnah means the carbon is not kosher, but the owner, the bailim, actually had a proper kapara. So then it says here, Omar. Omar Rav Nachman Yitzchak Afananam B'Tinina. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak says we actually learned. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we learned the following. Rabbi Yehuda says that Zois. So we're bringing a raya to this svara here. It says in the pasuk Zois he ha'olah. Tell Aaron and the children that this is the olah. That's very limiting. Zois this, Toidas ha'olah, he ha'olah. This is the olah, and it says ha'olah, the principal hey. So it's like 3 limitations here. What's he trying to say? These are miyutim. These are limitations as far as the follow. Prat, to tell you that if nishchata b'layla, you shecht at night. You cannot shecht at night. If you did, we're talking about over here that things which are possible shouldn't be placed on the mizbeach. But if you did place it on the mizbeach, we learned further. Im also loitated. Once it's on the mizbeach, you don't take it down. But there are certain exceptions that even though it's on the mizbeach, you do take it down. And what is that? So he says here, prat lenish. These three exceptions: zois, he, and ha'olah. Lenish, if it's geshechted at night and then you put in mizbeach, take it off. Shenish berdama. If the blood was spilled out, so you never sprinkled the blood, take it off. If the blood was taken outside of the Beis Hamikdash, then you cannot put the animal on the mizbeach. He also stated, even though that it went on the mizbeach, you have to remove it. Rab Shimon says the other way around. Rab Shimon says, I don't think these are miyutim. I think these are actually ribuyim, coming to include. What do you mean? Rab Shimon says that oila, all I know is that oil is kosher to burn all night on the mizbech. That's what the pasuk is saying here. Oila moitos mizbech kol alayla. Minayin l'rabbis. How do you know to include the cases that you excluded? I'm going to include. How does it include shenishchata b'layla if he shechted at night, or shenishpat dama of the blood, or the blood spilled out, or sheyatza dama chutz aklayim, the blood went outside of the Beis Hamikdash? How do you know that if you put it up on top of the bech, you leave it there? The halon, and how do you know if somebody, let's say, for example, leaves the meat outside of the Beis overnight, or hayotze, you took the meat outside the Beis Hamikdash, or tamei, or became tamei, or shenishchet chutz lezmanoi, or if you shechted it outside of the right time, no, it's pigul. But you took the animal and by mistake, even though it's possible, you put it on the mizbech. You shouldn't have, but you did. Or chutz l'mekayim, you had in mind the wrong place. Or shekiblu psulim, apostle l'kayim accepted it. The zarko is dama, you sprinkle the blood. V'hanitnin l'mayla shenitnin l'mata, that which should have been placed above, you place below. Or hanitnin l'mata, that which should have been sprinkled below the line, for example, carbon oil, shenitnin l'mayla, and you place it above the line. V'hanitnin b'fnim shenitnin b'chutz, says clearly here, that which should have been done on the inner mizbeach, you placed on the outer mizbeach. The fact is, it's a mizbeach. V'hanitnin b'chutz b'fnim, well, the other way around. Mizbeach the outer, and you put it in the mizbeach. V'hapesach v'achatas shasholosh. When we looked at the first Mishnah, that carbon pesach achatas are the only two kabbanas. If you had the wrong carbon in mind, you're not yotze. All other kabbanas, you had the wrong carbon in mind. Still a valid carbon, just you didn't fulfill your obligation to bring another one. But the chatos and pesach, it's not a good carbon at all. Menayin, how do you know in all of these cases, if you place it on the mizbeach, leave it there already? Tamalaymer. I learned out from the pasuk. It says toiras ha'ola. Toiras ha'ola is inclusive. Riba. Toira achas l'chola oila. Toiras ha'ola we read as if it says there's one law for anything that goes on the mizbeach. Shema olu lo yardu. Once it goes up, it doesn't go down. So you see clearly from here, we have we'll see. Right now we have Rab Shimon who clearly says that if you did a one mizbeach, one mizbeach put on the other mizbeach, it's you leave it on the mizbeach. Then he continued. Yochol, I would have thought if anything you put on mizbeach is kosher, I would have thought to include also shani marbe. I should include af hareveya b'hanirba, animals involved in bestiality, or hamuktzah, if you set aside an animal to be slaughtered before avodah zarah, or haneved, if the animal itself was worshipped as an avodah zarah, esnan, a gift you give to a harlot, you cannot use that for the mizbeach, or hamechid, if you made an exchange for a dog, a sheep for a dog, or haklaim, yeah, it's a hybrid, or vatreifer, the animal is treif, over yetzer treifer is born through cesarean. How do you know these are exceptions and you cannot put them on mizbeach? Tamalaymer, because it says zois. On the one hand, you have toidas ha'olah, which is all expansive. On the other hand, you have zois, which is limiting. So I'm limiting these and they're not those. Asking about how do you know which ones to exclude, which ones to include? Why are you trying to include these and next with others? So we answer. Because these psulim we just mentioned right now have nothing to do, they didn't start from the moment you went in the Beis HaMikdash. There were problems before. I'm only going to include in Toidas Ha'olah psulim that applied because of Kodesh, because of the Hegdish and all that. There's a problem. These are all problems unique to Hegdish. But a Moitziani I will exclude as Elu Shaloi Hoya psulim beKodesh, that these were not possible for Kodesh. All of these things were possible before you even hit Kodesh. Ktani Miha, one of the cases that Shimon said was that anitin lemata shnitin lemayla, or lemayla shnitin lemata, that if you did it above, you went below, or below you went above. And yet, the loy polar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't argue. Rabbi Yehuda only argues in the three cases you shechted at night that the blood, went outside of the Beis HaMikdash. In all other cases, he seems to agree. He seems to agree that if you're supposed to go on the top, you went the bottom of top. If you put it on the mizbeach, you can leave it there. It shows you what the mizbeach has some impact on it. So when I say that you cannot reuse the blood because the mizbeach had an impact in my time, Allah should call the mizbeach. The mizbeach had an effect in it. Therefore, you cannot collect the blood again because the mizbeach already sort of took ownership. It already belongs to the mizbeach. You cannot reuse it again on the mizbeach. Amar said the side thing, mizbeach habenimi, the inner mizbeach. Also, mikadosh psulim. Also, anything you put on the inner mizbeach by mistake remains there, becomes holy, and you cannot remove it. And even though the pasuk is written toidas ha'olah on the outer mizbeach, will apply the same rule in inner mizbeach. So you want to make a mashma? What's your chiddush? Tanina, didn't we learn? Hanitnim b'fnim. We just learned right now. Shimon says that inner mizbeach, outer mizbeach, it's all the same. So Gemara said, no, there's a difference between the inner and the outer mizbeach. In what regard? If we could learn from them, I would have thought, Hani mili dam the chazile. I would have thought only blood, which is suitable for the inner mizbeach. If you put it on the mizbeach, leave it there. Aval kaimet. But when it comes to kmitza, the loy chazi klal, there is no other ketayles, no other mincha that's brought on the inner mizbeach. So therefore, because there's no connection between the inner mizbeach and the carbon mincha, I would have thought that if you put it on the inner mizbeach, remove it because it has nothing to do with it. Aval kaimet lechazile emalai. No, Kamashal comes to tell you that anything that goes on the inner mizbeach remains in it. Says the Gemara, I'll prove it to you differently. Makes a question. It says, Ktoidis zara, strange incense, sha'ola legabi mizbeach, that went on the outer mizbeach, tated, remove it. Why? And the outer mizbech, you have to remove something if it's not suitable for the outer mizbech. She'ein lach mekadesh psulin, ella mizbech she'ein lach mekadesh psulin, ella mizbech hachitzin berola. That what is mekadesh psulin? Only the outer mizbech, things which are suitable. But a kaimitz, traders that you didn't put into a clay shadetz is not suitable for the mizbech. The mizbech does not protect it. Now he's saying here the outer mizbech protects things which are suitable. So we can infer, but the inner mizbech protects nothing. So it sounds like chitzoni and only the outer mizbech primi loy. It sounds like the inner mizbech doesn't protect anything at all. That means anything you put in the inner mizbech doesn't belong. They take it off. Says no, you learned wrong. This is how the inference should be. This is how you should answer. But the outer mizbech is only if it's suitable. The outer mizbech only sanctifies, consecrates those things which are suitable. But the inner mizbech, bein roloi, whether it's suitable, bein she'ein roloi, when it's not suitable, it'll take it, it'll accept it. Now, why should it be different? Why should the inner mizbech be different than the outer mizbech? It's an interesting thing. In my time, why? High ritzpah. The outer mizbech is considered part of the ground. Because the outer mizbech, apart from the mizbech that was built in the Mishkan, which was coated with gold and wood, the other mizbech that they built was made out of stone. So it's just like the floor, but it's risen from the floor. So it's still considered part of the floor. That was, and Rashi adds, it was never anointed with oil. Therefore, it doesn't have enough kedusha to sanctify things that are not related to the mizbech. But the high clay shot is the inner mizbech, which they say that the inner mizbech, definitely the first Beis Hamikdash, was the same as Moshe Rabbeinu's. The inner mizbech was really just a clay shot, and they smeared oil on it. Therefore, it has so much more kedusha. It's able to consecrate even those things that had no place on that mizbech at all. Mishnah. So we're continuing. Hashoichet es hazeva. Now we learn that concept of pickle. There's two kinds of pickles. Pickle has to do mainly with your thought process. You didn't do anything wrong other than thinking. There is a big machlekes in the Rishonim whether thinking means just thinking or thinking means thinking and speaking as well. Because Rashi shit in many instances, not just in Kochim, where he talks about Truma and by Bittul Lachametz, that the thought process is not enough. You actually have to say it. Now, the question, and the other Rishonim hold thinking is enough. Even when you have to say it, in Achronim, there's two views. Is the pshat really it's a thought process that makes it happen? But how do we know? So you have to say it. Or is the pshat the words themselves have to be said in order for it to be effective? And obviously the words are hollow if you don't mean it. But it's not the thought; it's the words that make it happen. So now there's two kinds of pickle. One is you had in mind the wrong time. Instead of eating it, tomorrow, let's say today and tomorrow like a shlami, you have in mind you eat it next week. And then there's another pickle called chutz l'mekaymer. You had in mind that you'll eat it, let's say, it's supposed to be eaten in the Kodesh Kodashim, in the Beis Hamikdash, you had in mind to eat it outside the Beis Hamikdash. For the first one, you get kares. For the second one, you don't. And that's what the whole Gemara, tomorrow's Gemara is going to be, how do you know to make that distinction? But first, let's learn the Mishnah establishes the rule. Somebody checked the carbon, and you had in mind to sprinkle the blood outside, so the wrong place. Another chiddush, not even all the blood, part of the blood. Lahaktir emura b'chutz. You're going to roast the fats on the outside. The word emura, fats, some say it's omar. The word you said that you're going to bring a carbon. The Sefer Aruch says that the word emura is fats, and the word mar, master, or choshev. This is like a choshev, a present we're giving to Hashem, the fats. Goes in mizbech. So if you had in mind that you're going to roast the fats, remember it has to do, you have to have a mind regarding the eating, but there's two kinds of eating, the eating for the owner and the eating for the mizbech. So we just spoke about the owner, now we're going about eating for the mizbech, you're placing the fats in the mizbech, b'chutz, in the wrong place. Or you're partial. Lechol b'sar b'chutz, or you're going to eat the basar on the outside. Sprinkling the blood is considered food for the mizbech. It's all about food. Sprinkling the blood is food for the mizbech, or putting the fats in the mizbech, or eating the meat, again, the wrong place. Even a kazayis. Which we'll discuss first. The oir alya is the tail, but the skin under the tail, which is very tender and soft, and it's actually edible by a sheep. And you had in mind to eat that outside. So it sounds like from the Mishnah that it's considered food. Possible, in all of these cases, possible, but the aim kares. That kind of pickle, you don't get kares. But If Lizak Damil Lamacha, if you had a mind to sprinkle the blood tomorrow, Mikta Damil Lamacha, or partial blood tomorrow, Ula Hakte Mudul Lamacha, you're going to roast the fats, but tomorrow. So it's not a question of the place, it's the time. I mixes the Mudul Lamacha, part of the fast tomorrow. Lechel B'sar Lamacha, to eat the flesh tomorrow, I Kazayis from Lamacha, or Kazayis. I Lechel Kazayis Mora Alyo, to eat a Kazayis from the skin of the tail, which is edible, Lamacha tomorrow. All of these cases are pigul and the chayam cars. Even if you ate it within the right time, you ate it an hour later. You didn't wait till the time expired. You still get cars because you're not allowed to eat that. We'll pause for a minute.